They came to me holding hands, not because they were rich, not because they were confident, but because they were afraid. I could see in the way the young man sat forward, shoulders tense. I could see in the way the woman held her purse close, as if money itself might escape. They had love. They had dreams. What they lacked was clarity. "Sir," the young man said carefully, "we work hard, but it feels like we're running in place." The woman nodded. "We don't want to be rich," she added softly. "We just want to be safe." I smiled, because I had heard those words before, from brilliant people, from honest people, and from people who would later lose everything if they did not learn the truth early. So I leaned back and asked them a question no banker ever asks. "Tell me," I said, "when money enters your home, who decides where it goes?" They looked at each other. Silence answered for them. And in that silence was the first lesson most couples never learn. Money does not destroy homes. Confusion does. I told them this. Wealth is not built by one strong person pulling another. It is built when two people walk in the same direction. I watched their faces change, because for the first time, they realized this was about salaries. It was about alignment. "Before I tell you how to grow money," I said gently, "I must teach you how to protect peace. Because a house that fights over money will never keep it. In the next part," I continued, "I will tell you the lie most couples believe about income, and why earning more often makes things worse, not better." I looked at them for a long moment before I spoke again. "You believe," I said slowly, "that if you earn more money, your problems will disappear." The young man nodded almost immediately. The woman hesitated, then nodded too. I smiled, not because they were right, but because they were honest. "Let me tell you something that may save your marriage one day," I said. "Income does not build wealth. Control does. I have watched couples double their salaries and still argue at night over groceries. Why? Because every new dollar was already promised to a lifestyle they had not yet learned to manage. When money increases without discipline, I told them, expenses rise to meet it. Bigger phones, nicer clothes, a car payment that feels harmless, until it isn't. They leaned in, so I asked them another question. "When you earn more, do you plan first, or do you reward yourselves first?" They didn't answer. Most people don't. That silence is expensive. "Here's the rule," I continued. "Every increase in income must first strengthen your foundation before it strengthens your comfort." I explained it simply. Before better furniture, build an emergency fund. Before vacations, erase toxic debt. Before luxury, secure stability. Because money that arrives without direction will always leave with regret. The woman spoke softly. "So, we shouldn't enjoy our money?" I shook my head. "No," I said kindly. "You should enjoy it after it stops threatening you." I told them this truth, the one no one likes to hear. Wealth is delayed pleasure. Poverty is instant gratification. They exchanged a look, not of fear this time, but of understanding. And then I leaned forward. "If you want a future that feels safe," I said, "you must learn to say not yet to things you can afford today." They nodded, because deep down they already knew. "In the next part," I said, "I will tell you why most couples stay broke. Not because they earn too little, but because they never speak honestly about money." I poured them each a cup of tea before I continued. "Let me ask you something uncomfortable," I said. The young woman smiled nervously. The man straightened in his seat. "When was the last time," I asked, "you spoke about money without defending yourselves?" They looked at each other again. This time, the silence was heavier. "Most couples," I said quietly, "don't fight because they lack money. They fight because they lack truth." I explained what I had seen over decades. One partner saves in silence. The other spends in silence. Both believe they're being reasonable. And resentment grows quietly. Money secrets, I told them, are more dangerous than money problems. Hidden debts, unspoken fears, private spending justified as small. Small things become large when ignored. The man finally spoke. I don't want her to think I'm failing. The woman's eyes softened. I don't want him to feel controlled. I nodded. There it is, I said. Fear on one side, pride on the other. I leaned closer. Wealth does not survive where ego leads. I told him the rule that saved my own marriage. Every financial decision must survive daylight. If you cannot explain it calmly, you should not be doing it secretly. Budgets are not prisons. They are agreements. Agreements protect love. I watched something shift between them. Shoulders relaxed. Breathing slowed. For the first time, the woman said, "This doesn't feel like pressure, it feels like a plan." I smiled, because that's what truth does. In the next part, I told them, I will show you why debt feels normal, and how it quietly steals your future, one payment at a time. I didn't raise my voice when I said this. I lowered it. Debt, I told them, is the most polite thief you will ever meet. It doesn't break your door. It doesn't shout. It smiles and asks for a small monthly commitment. The couple listened closely now. Debt promises comfort today. I continued, and quietly demands your future in return. I have seen strong marriages weakened by payments they no longer question. Cars that felt earned. Houses that felt deserved. Subscriptions that felt harmless. All chained together. The young man frowned. "But everyone has debt," he said. I nodded. "Yes," I replied. "And most people are tired because of it." I leaned forward. "When you owe tomorrow's income," I said, "you lose today's freedom." Debt forces decisions. It silences generosity. It turns emergencies into disasters. The woman asked quietly, "So should we avoid all debt?" I smiled again. "No," I said, "you should avoid emotional debt. Debt taken to impress, to compete, to feel equal to others. That is the kind that ruins homes." I gave him a rule I learned the hard way. If debt does not increase your ability to earn or protect your stability, it is stealing from you. Silence filled the room. Then I added gently, "You do not need to look rich to become wealthy. You need to look disciplined." They sat still, not afraid, awakened. In the next part, I said, I will tell you how to grow wealth together without letting money replace love. If this story is speaking to something inside you, this channel was created for you. On Echoes of Wisdom, every story is told to leave you wiser than before. Subscribe and walk this journey with us. I watch them sit closer now, not because I asked them to, but because understanding has a way of doing that. Let me tell you something most people learn too late. I said, wealth grows faster when no one is pulling alone. Too many couples divide money into sides. My income, your spending, my sacrifice, your enjoyment. That division poisons progress. I told them this truth. Money does not respond to effort alone. It responds to unity. When one saves while the other resents, wealth slows. When one dreams while the other doubts, wealth stalls. But when both agree on direction, I said, even small steps move mountains. I asked them to imagine their future, not in numbers, but in values. What kind of life do you want? What kind of pressure do you want to avoid? What kind of freedom matters to you? Not cars, not houses. Freedom. Freedom to rest. Freedom to choose. Freedom to help without fear. Build goals that serve both of you. I advised, not goals that compete with each other. I told them how my wife and I did it. One plan, one budget, one vision, different roles, but one direction. The young man nodded slowly. So it's not about who earns more? I smiled. No, I said, it's about who commits deeper. Because wealth does not come from dominance. It comes from partnership. I will teach you how to make money work for you, even while you sleep, without gambling your future. I let the room go quiet before I spoke again. Hard work, I said slowly, is honorable, but it was never meant to be permanent. They looked up. I know men who work themselves into ground. I continued, and still left nothing behind but exhaustion. I walked to the window and watched the city breathe below us. Money was created to serve time. I said, not to steal it. I turned back to them. Here's the truth most people never hear. If your income stops when you stop working, you are not yet free. The young man shifted in his chair. That sounds dangerous, he said. I nodded. It is, I replied, which is why it must be approached with patience, not hunger. I explained the difference. Hungry people chase trends. Patient people build systems. Hungry people want proof quickly. Patient people want certainty slowly. Never invest to escape your life. I told them, invest to strengthen it. I spoke about skills before assets. Skills compound faster than money. I said, once you can create value, money will always find you. I told them how my first investments were not glamorous. Books, learning, mistakes I paid for in time, not debt, anything that promises speed. I warned, usually hides risk. The woman asked quietly, but how do we know it's safe? I smiled. You don't. I said, you learn enough to recognize what's reckless. I gave them my personal rule. If you don't understand how money is made, you are the one being made money from. Silence. Then I continued. Wealth grows when you protect what you have while preparing for what you want. Start small. Diversify slowly. Reinvest patiently. Because money obeys consistency, not excitement. I leaned in one final time. Your goal, I said, is not to be rich while young, but to be secure while old. That is real freedom. I will show you how generosity fits into wealth and why giving without wisdom can break even good people. I did not speak immediately. This lesson I knew required care. Generosity, I finally said, is a beautiful thing, but when it is not guided, it becomes dangerous. They looked surprised. People assume the wealthy give easily. I continued. The truth is, we learn when to give, how to give, and when not to. I told them something few expect to hear. I have seen good people give themselves into poverty, I said, not because they were foolish, but because they lack boundaries. Money given from guilt disappears. Money given from wisdom multiplies. I explained the difference. Helping someone stand is generosity. Carrying them forever is a burden. Your wealth, I told them, should lift people, not trap you. The woman frowned slightly. But isn't giving supposed to hurt a little? I smiled gently. Yes, I said, but it should never harm. I gave them a rule I live by to this day. Never give what you cannot replace without resentment, because resentment poisons generosity. I told them how we chose causes intentionally. Education, skills, opportunity, charity that teaches, I said, lasts longer than charity that rescues. And then I said something that made them sit still. True generosity is not visible, I said. It is felt. No announcements, no applause, no obligation, just impact. I will leave you with the one lesson that ties wealth, love, discipline, and legacy together. The lesson that decides what your children inherit. I noticed something had changed in their posture. They were no longer listening like students. They were listening like builders. Now, I said gently, we must talk about something most people postpone until it's too late. They waited. Legacy, I continued, is not what you leave behind. It is what you build into people while you're still here. Most chase wealth as an achievement. Few understand it as a responsibility. You see, I told them, money outlives emotions. It outlives ambition. And if you are careless, outlives wisdom too. I explained what I had learned watching families rise and fall. Parents work hard, but never explain why. They provide comfort, but never teach discipline. And one day, what took decades to build is undone in a few careless years. Wealth without values, I said, is just delayed destruction. The woman spoke softly. So what should we pass on? I smiled. Not money first, I said. Mindset first. Teach patience before inheritance. Teach discipline before access. Teach humility before authority. Your children, I continued, will copy what you live, not what you say. I leaned back. The greatest gift you can give, I said, is not a large bank account, but the wisdom to keep one. They sat quietly, absorbing it, because for the first time, they weren't thinking about survival. They were thinking about continuation. I will show you how daily habits quietly decide whether wealth stays or slips away. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the polished table. This, I said slowly, is where most people fail, not in ambition, not in talent, not in opportunities. They fail in consistency. The couple listened closely. Their eyes followed every movement. I smiled softly. Daily choices, I explained, are the true architects of wealth, not sudden windfalls, not flashy deals, not inherited money. The habits you keep quietly every morning, every evening, that is what compounds over time. I pulled out a notebook from my briefcase, worn at the edges. This, I said, tapping the cover, contains the rituals I've followed for decades. Simple things, but life-changing. I wrote 3 words on the first page. Discipline, awareness, generosity. Discipline, I said, means showing up for your financial plan even when you don't feel like it. It means tracking expenses, resisting instant gratification, and honoring agreements with each other. I looked at the young man. You see, it's easy to plan when money is flowing. The real test is when it slows or disappears. I turned to the young woman. Awareness, I continued, means knowing exactly where your money comes from and where it goes. It's checking the tiny leaks, subscriptions, small debts, forgotten bills, before they drown your future. They scribbled notes furiously, realizing this was not abstract advice. This was survival, growth, and freedom distilled. And then I said, leaning back, comes generosity, but not blind generosity. You give with intention, within limits, and with foresight. You lift others without lifting yourself out of balance. This is how wealth transforms not just your life, but the lives around you. The room was quiet. I could hear the tick of the old clock, measuring the seconds like lessons waiting to settle. Most people, I said, treat habits like choices. They are not. They are silent compounding forces. Every late night spent mindlessly scrolling, every impulse purchase, every missed conversation about money in your home. These are deposits into chaos. They flinched slightly. I continued softly. But every morning you discuss a budget. Every week you review your investments. Every month you pause to reflect on your choices. These are deposits into security, growth, and legacy. I paused and let the weight of that sink in. Habits, I said finally, decide whether wealth survives for decades or vanishes overnight. It's not the flashy investments or sudden windfalls that matter. It's what you do every single day that defines your future. The young man looked at his fiancée and nodded. I see now, he said. It's not about chasing more money. It's about managing what we already have wisely. I smiled. Exactly. And that, I said, is the bridge to legacy. Because when habits are strong, wealth can support love, freedom, and even generosity. Weak habits, they destroy all 3, silently over time. I closed my notebook. And in the final part, I said, I will leave you the ultimate lesson, a single truth that ties love, discipline, wealth, and legacy together. Miss it, and all you've learned may crumble. Grasp it, and your family can thrive for generations. The couple sat quietly. They had listened, absorbed, taken notes. But now, I wanted them to remember one thing above all else. I stood slowly and walked the balcony. The city lights shimmered below, countless lives, countless choices. I gestured toward it. Look at all of this, I said softly. Buildings, cars, screens, numbers, dreams, failures, lives intertwined with money. All of it is fleeting. All of it can vanish in a moment if the foundation is weak. They followed my gaze. I continued, calm but firm. Here's a single truth every wealthy person learns. The truth most people never hear. Wealth is not what you earn. Wealth is what you keep, grow, and pass on without destroying yourself, your values, or your relationships. The young man swallowed. The woman's eyes glistened. Discipline, I said, is more valuable than income. Patience is more valuable than luck. Wisdom is more valuable than advice. And generosity, when guided by discipline, is more valuable than gold. I turned to them, my voice steady. Your money must serve your life, not your life serve your money. Every day, every choice, every habit either builds your legacy or chips away at it. I let the words hang in the room for a long moment. And remember, I said softly, almost a whisper, true wealth is freedom, choice, and impact. Do not confuse it with applause. Do not confuse it with envy. Do not confuse it with fleeting pleasure. The couple nodded. They were no longer students. They were architects of their future. I smiled. From today forward, treat every dollar, every decision, every conversation as a deposit into the life you want, not a withdrawal from it. I leaned back, and one day I said, you will understand why the richest people measure success not by their bank accounts, but by the lives they touch, the stability they create, and the legacy they leave behind. The young man looked at his fiancée, then at me. Thank you, he whispered, not for the money advice, but for showing us what wealth really means. I nodded, and in that moment I knew they would never forget this lesson. Final thought for the audience. Wealth is a tool. Discipline is the engine. Wisdom is the compass. And the lives you uplift, that is the true measure of richness. Stories end, but wisdom stays. If you believe stories can change the way we see life, welcome to Echoes of Wisdom. Subscribe, and let every story leave you better than it found you.